Henry Ford stated, "It is well that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." We're now at a point where it's becoming clear that the countdown to doomsday is underway. It is financially impossible for the world in its current form to continue to operate. The debts are just too high, and it is becoming quite clear that it will not be happening. Now, as far as the ability of the financial system to come out of the hole it's in, it is becoming very clear that even the deficits can't be funded. Tony Robbins pointed out recently, he brushes shoulders with a lot of very powerful people, and he pointed out that even if every dollar from every company and every tax dollar and every dollar that the rich had was put into a pool, it would still not even cover just the deficit of the 2012 financial year for the US. The other key issue is that the US dollar cannot stay the reserve currency forever. China, Russia and India, among others, are beginning to deal in their own currencies and in gold. China and Japan are dumping the US dollar in bilateral trade. The BRICS nations, which are India, China, South Africa, and Brazil and Russia, are planning to use their own currencies when trading with each other. The Russia-China currency agreement, the growing use of Chinese currency in Africa, the China-United Arab Emirates deal, these are all reasons that the US dollar is ceasing to be the reserve currency of the world, and it is a widespread understanding that once that happens, that the US in its current form just cannot continue funding its expenses. It cannot keep funding it by printing trillions of dollars and thus transferring the cost of their operations to the rest of the world who deal in reserve currency dollars, being the US dollar. So as these nations move away from the US dollar, they move away from the influence of the US, and they also are establishing their own systems that will in end bring the US dollar down. Another reason, Iran's been one of the most aggressive nations when it comes to moving away from the US dollar in international trade, and it's been reported that India will begin to use gold to buy oil from Iran. There's a lot of things happening there. The China-Saudi Arabia relationship. The United Nations has been pushing as a result for a new world reserve currency. The banking cartels and those that operate the major systems, financial systems and economic systems in our world, they know that this dollar is having its number come up, that it's coming to an end. One UN report envisioned a new global reserve system in which the US no longer has dominance. A new global reserve system could be created, they said, one that no longer relies on the United States dollar as the single major reserve currency. So there's a scramble for power there by those that control the world's financial systems. Thus, the IMF has been pushing for a new world reserve currency. And the simple fact that most people do not want to see the United States dollar as the reserve currency for obvious reasons is going to push the US dollar into a pretty untenable position as time continues. The demise of the dollar will bring massive changes to the American lifestyle, and it already has brought some pretty dramatic changes. When the economic tsunami hits America, it will make the 2008 recession and aftermath look like a little bump. It will bring so many undesirable changes to American lifestyle, massive inflation, huge interest rates will have to operate in order for the state to keep funding itself. And there'll be substantial increases in the cost of food, clothing and gasoline. And that is going to have a massive detrimental aspect, and the rest of the world will most certainly not be immune. We now have the banks sitting on billions using the taxpayer bills that they have generated with the compliance of US Treasury, of central banks around the world who have handed all of these magicked out of nowhere funds to keep them in business, but often they're not lending, they're actually buying government bonds with them. And so the amount of currency available in the economy is still so low that businesses are continually failing. James Madison once said, "History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance." Now that money circulation continues to reduce, we're seeing further job losses, and we know that the unemployment figures are bogus. The way they have been measured has been changed in just about every Western nation in the world. Over here in Australia, working just 1 hour makes you employed, and there are a lot of people that aren't able to get benefits, that aren't working, that are still considered to be employed or not included as part of the unemployed. Anyone that's doing work for the dole is not considered to be unemployed. But you only have to turn on the TV or look in the paper and you can see that major companies are shedding jobs by the thousands, that the bankruptcy figures for small business and companies are at record highs and continuing to increase. Now here in Australia, we've just had our own austerity measures put forward, just like in Europe, and that's going to have the same effect that it's had over there with massively shrinking GDPs. We could quite easily see our GDP shrink by several percent in the coming financial year as our systems start to contract as a result of that. Right now, the global share market is tanking. We're getting ready for major bank runs all over the world. We've already seen them starting to happen over in Europe, in Greece and Spain in particular. And there's some really concerning events that are starting to occur in terms of employment benefits. Over in the US, there are millions that are coming to the end of their ability to keep claiming unemployment funds as they're getting to the end of their 2-year unemployment limit, which was extended after the aftermath of the GFC and the hugely rising numbers of unemployed persons. There are now millions coming to the end of their ability to even claim unemployment benefits at all. So we're looking at this causing absolute chaos in many cities, and no doubt this is a trend which will begin to occur in other nations as the ability for the nation and willingness of a nation to fund millions of unemployed begins to reach the end of its tether. The global bank runs are looking at putting a $1 trillion black hole into balance sheets that are already shot as real estate values fall all around the world, and the central banks are pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into these banks as we speak. People just have lost faith in the system. They're looking at Greece exiting the system, and as a result there is going to be a continuance of those bank runs, and that will escalate as more and more people lose faith and begin to pull their funds out. Now all of us in the West are heading down the slope to the type of persecution that third world countries have been suffering for decades at the hands of the IMF, the World Bank, and the global banking cartels that have been set up to extract wealth and support the elite and their plans. This is really happening. This is not just a whole bunch of steam. This is not just hot air. This stuff is actually occurring, and until one actually begins to read into the details of why and how this is happening, you can't really understand it. And for that reason, I'd recommend some great books like Vile Acts of Evil. You can get that on Amazon and on Kindle. Collapse is a great book that looks at the characteristics behind collapses of past civilizations and really helps us to understand where we are today and why these things happen, why every society does collapse. And my book Moneybags is going to be available in a few months' time. So I really believe that's going to have a big impact on a lot of people, and it is really poignant. A lot of the stuff that I talk about in that book as to the history of where all this has come from. It makes me blow off a bit of steam. I get fired up when I hear and read about these guys that have taken over government systems all around the world over the course of centuries and just spoon feeding the average person. They really don't understand until they just make the effort to look into the history and the present realities. This is real stuff. Henry Kissinger, in an address to the Bilderberg meeting, today Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow they will be grateful. This is especially true if they are told there is an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being, guaranteed to them by their world government. And that was said by Henry Kissinger in an address to the Bilderberg meeting, where a lot of globalists that have openly stated they want to see a one world government and they want to just absolutely destroy nation state sovereignty, and they're willing to do it either by force or by covert means. Make no mistake about that. We need to be strong, keep preparing for change. Most people will be shocked out of their minds and begging for a global currency and global government before long. Don't be one of those people. And just because Revelation says the world will end and be dominated by evil for a time and have a global system doesn't mean we should sit by and watch it happen. We need to be aware of the spiritual evils in the world and also maintain a vigilant stance against the physical manifestations of that evil that intend to enslave us. You can't truly have one without the other. You cannot have the awareness of one without the awareness of the other. Both go hand in hand. One cannot understand the spiritual evils without understanding their manifestation on our global system. And one cannot understand the manifestation of evil in our global system without understanding the spiritual manifestations that are behind it. And again, you're not going to glean that information from a short talk like this. I really encourage you to go out, have a look, read up for yourself, and you will discover that there's a wealth of information out there that is absolutely so compelling that you cannot truly do the research and claim anything other than our world has been overtaken by wicked, greedy men that have been driving society into the ground for centuries. So let's make a stand and keep vigilant and keep learning. Thanks for watching.